The air was thick with tension. Across the galaxy, millions were watching the live broadcast. It wasn't just another political execution. No, this was a message, a warning from the Galactic Empire to all those who dared challenge their rule. The screen flickered to life, showing a young human girl, no older than 16, shackled and kneeling before the Emperor's throne. Her eyes, though filled with fear, held a defiance that sent a shiver down the spines of those watching. She wasn't just any girl. She was humanity's symbol of resistance. Her name was Emily, a girl who had become the face of the human rebellion against the Galactic Empire. The Empire had spent years trying to silence her, but no matter what they did, she had remained a beacon of hope for all those who dreamed of freedom. Today, though, they would make an example of her. The Emperor, his cruel face etched with arrogance, stepped forward. "This is what happens to those who defy the Empire," he declared in his booming voice, his words echoing through the hollow chamber. He raised his hand, signaling for the execution to proceed. But Emily didn't flinch. She didn't beg. She didn't cry. She stood tall, even as the cold blade of the executioner's sword glinted in the light. The countdown began. 30 seconds. The screen zoomed in on her face as she locked eyes with the camera, staring directly into the hearts of every single person watching. Her message was clear. She wasn't afraid. And then, just as the executioner raised the sword, something happened. A surge of energy pulsed through the atmosphere, shaking the very foundations of the Empire's broadcast network. The power went out for a brief moment, and when the feed returned, Emily was no longer on her knees. Instead, standing before the executioner was a figure cloaked in darkness, a human, though not any ordinary human. The air around him crackled with an unfamiliar power, and his eyes burned with a fury that sent the Empire's soldiers into a panic. His presence was overwhelming, as though the very essence of humanity's strength had materialized before them. "You think you can break us?" The figure's voice was low, resonating with an authority that no one had ever dared to challenge. The Emperor's gaze hardened. "Who dares interfere with the Empire's justice?" "I do," the figure replied, his voice now thunderous. "And I'm not alone." In an instant, ships, hundreds of them, appeared in the sky. Massive warships, all human-made, all advanced beyond anything the Empire had ever seen. The Empire's fleet, stationed across the galaxy, received an immediate transmission, a chilling message that sent waves of fear throughout the Empire. "We are humanity. We are coming for you." The broadcast was cut off. Silence fell. Then, the explosion of a distant starship being obliterated shattered the calm. The Empire's worst nightmare had just become a reality. The Empire had thought themselves invincible. They had thought the humans were weak, broken, and easy to crush. But now, the humans had arrived. Not as prisoners, not as slaves, but as the most formidable force the galaxy had ever known. The countdown had ended. The Empire's reign was over. The atmosphere in the Galactic Empire's command center was one of pure chaos. Officers scrambled, trying to make sense of the catastrophe unfolding before them. Their fleets, which had been carefully positioned to maintain order in the galaxy, were being systematically wiped out. The Emperor's closest generals, once confident and unshakable, were now reduced to mere panic-stricken figures, unable to comprehend what was happening. The human ships, sleek and deadly, cut through the Empire's defenses like a blade through paper. Their technology, once thought to be primitive by the standards of galactic civilization, had evolved far beyond anyone's expectations. The humans had learned, adapted, and, most importantly, survived. Emily, still standing at the center of the broadcast screen, was no longer alone. The figure who had appeared in place of her, the one who had freed her from certain death, now stood beside her. His appearance was different, his features almost too perfect, too sharp. His armor gleamed with a menacing, yet elegant design, an unsettling blend of human craftsmanship and a strange, otherworldly energy. "I am Reaper," the man said, his voice carrying the weight of countless battles. "And this war, it's just begun." Across the galaxy, a new message spread like wildfire. It wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration. "We are humanity, and we will never bow to you." The humans had arrived, and they were not the weak, desperate species the Empire had believed them to be. They were now a force of unimaginable power, and the Empire was about to learn just how costly its underestimation of them would be. Back on Earth, humanity had prepared for this day for centuries. Hidden from the eyes of the Empire, they had built their own armada, their own weapons, and their own warriors. They had studied the alien races, learned their weaknesses, and crafted their own technology in secret. Every step, every move had been calculated. And now, they were executing their plan with ruthless precision. As the Empire's command center was thrown into turmoil, Reaper addressed Emily, his eyes never leaving the screen as he scanned the data coming in. "It's time. The first wave is ready." Emily nodded, her defiance still evident in her gaze. She had once been the symbol of resistance, but now, with Reaper by her side, she had become the symbol of humanity's resurgence. A girl who had been about to die on a live broadcast was now a leader in the greatest war the galaxy had ever seen. The first wave of human ships descended upon the Empire's homeworld, targeting key locations with surgical precision. No more mercy. No more negotiations. The humans weren't here to negotiate peace. They were here to bring justice. And justice, for them, meant the complete annihilation of their oppressors. Back in the Emperor's palace, his face twisted in disbelief. The reports came flooding in, one after another, each one worse than the last. Human ships had entered their territory without warning, cutting down every defensive position the Empire had in place. "We've underestimated them," one of his generals stammered, panic creeping into his voice. The Emperor's face grew dark. "Prepare for counterattack," he ordered, though even as the words left his lips, he knew it was too late. The Empire, so proud and untouchable, had underestimated the humans for too long. But now, the humans were no longer the meek and helpless species they once were. They had become something far more dangerous, something that could not be reasoned with, something that could not be stopped. The Empire's soldiers, trained in the art of war and conquest, were no match for humanity's fury. And as the human ships tore through the Empire's defenses, Reaper stood beside Emily, watching it all unfold. The galaxy would never be the same again. The Empire had made a fatal mistake, and now it would pay the price. "Let's end this," Emily whispered, her voice full of resolve. And so they did. The Empire's retaliation came quickly, but it was as futile as throwing stones at a tidal wave. Their warships, which once commanded fear and respect, now seemed like toys in the hands of humanity. The human ships moved with precision, their weapons tearing through enemy hulls like they were nothing more than paper. In mere hours, the Emperor's fleet was in disarray, scattered and destroyed piece by piece. In the depths of the Empire's command center, Emperor Kalzer's rage boiled over. His empire, his life's work, was unraveling before his eyes. This was no longer a battle. It was a massacre. His generals and admirals tried to organize counterattacks, but every move they made was anticipated, every strategy nullified before it could even be enacted. "What are we doing wrong?" one of the generals screamed, her voice breaking with panic. "Why can't we stop them?" Kalzer, once so confident in his supremacy, clenched his fists. "It's the humans. They've learned everything about us. Our tactics, our weaknesses. They've outsmarted us at every turn." But Kalzer's admission was too late. The humans had already anticipated this moment, and they had planned for it. Back on the battlefield, the human forces moved in perfect synchronization. A small squadron of ships, led by Reaper himself, advanced towards the heart of the Empire's capital. The Empire had never seen such a display of strategic brilliance. It was as though the humans knew their every move before they made it. Reaper's ship, the Exodus, cut through the chaos with an eerie calm. The battle was fierce, but the humans had something the Empire had never expected: unity. Each ship, each soldier, was a part of something much larger than themselves. It wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for revenge, for justice, for freedom. Emily, now fully integrated into the command structure of the human fleet, stood at the bridge of the Exodus. She was no longer the scared girl who had once been shackled to her fate. She was a symbol of humanity's vengeance. Her presence inspired every soldier, every pilot, every crew member. They fought not just for her, but for every human who had ever been oppressed by the Empire. "We're almost there," Emily said, her voice steady but filled with fire. "The Emperor's palace is within striking distance. Once we hit it, it's over." The crew around her nodded, their resolve unwavering. They knew what was at stake. They knew the galaxy was watching. Meanwhile, in the heart of the Emperor's palace, the desperation was palpable. Kalzar watched as the Exodus and its fleet advanced. He could feel the inevitability of his defeat creeping closer. There was no escape from this. No hope left. I should have killed her when I had the chance, he muttered under his breath, his eyes narrowing in regret. I should have silenced that girl before she became a threat. But now it was too late. The humans were upon them. As the human fleet reached the Empire's capital, Reaper gave the order. Prepare for the final strike. The fleet descended in perfect formation, bypassing the remnants of the Empire's defenses with ease. The human ships moved in sync, their weapons primed, their objective clear. Take down the heart of the Empire in one devastating blow. On the surface of the capital world, chaos erupted. The Empire's remaining soldiers fought desperately, but they were no match for the overwhelming force of the humans. The city's once proud buildings crumbled under the weight of humanity's wrath. The streets that had once been filled with the sounds of imperial parades were now filled with the roar of human justice. At the heart of it all, in the Emperor's palace, Kalzar realized that there was no escape. His empire had fallen. His reign was over. And then, in the final moments before the human fleet unleashed its full power, Reaper's voice crackled over the comms, speaking to the galaxy. His words rang out like thunder, heard by every living being in the Empire's domain. The Galactic Empire thought it could crush us, that it could break us. But the truth is, we've been waiting for this moment for centuries. We are humanity, and we do not bow to tyranny. Your empire is finished. And with that, the Exodus fired its final shot, a missile of unimaginable power, directly at the Emperor's palace. The explosion that followed was seen across the galaxy, a bright flash of light that signified the end of the Empire's reign. In that moment, the human forces had done what was once thought impossible. They had torn down the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known. The Galactic Empire had fallen. But the story of humanity's rise had only just begun. The galaxy stood still in the wake of the Empire's fall. Across countless star systems, citizens of every race and species watched in stunned silence as the once mighty Galactic Empire crumbled into dust. The symbol of tyranny and oppression had been obliterated, but the victory came with its own heavy weight. Humanity had proven their might, but now, the galaxy would face the consequences of their rebellion. The Empire's crumbling structures were scattered across countless planets, its soldiers scattered in the wind. But the war was far from over. There were remnants of the Empire, factions that refused to accept their defeat. They would rise, seeking vengeance, clinging to the old power they once wielded. But there was no escaping the truth. The Empire was shattered beyond repair. The old world order had been destroyed, and in its place, a new order was emerging. Reaper stood in the command center of the Exodus, his eyes scanning the holographic map of the galaxy. The battle was won, but the war for the future of the galaxy was just beginning. The Empire's remnants were scattered, but they were dangerous. They still had resources, still had fleets. It was not enough to win a battle. Now, they had to ensure the galaxy remained free. Emily stood beside him, her once young face now hardened by the weight of the struggle. She was no longer the girl who had been shackled before the Emperor. She was a leader, a symbol of humanity's triumph. Her eyes were cold as she surveyed the map, her mind calculating the next move. "We need to act fast," Emily said, her voice sharp. "The remnants of the Empire will try to regroup, and we can't let them." Reaper nodded. "The first step is to dismantle their supply lines. If we hit their remaining strongholds and choke their resources, we can starve them out." Emily's gaze narrowed. "But we can't just sit back and wait. We need to send a message, not just to the Empire, but to the entire galaxy." The Empire had already made their message clear to the humans. They were a force to be reckoned with, and their strength was unyielding. But now, the galaxy needed to understand that humanity was not here to rule. It was here to ensure the balance of power, to put an end to the cycles of oppression and destruction that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. "The message has already been sent," Reaper said, his voice grave. "But we can't let our guard down. We've just seen what happens when we underestimate our enemies." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the resistance forces that had once rallied under Emily's banner were now gathering in force. Planets once under the Empire's brutal control were starting to take back their freedom. Species that had long been subjugated were now standing up, emboldened by humanity's rise. They rallied to the cause, joining the human-led coalition in a desperate push for lasting peace. But with every victory, there was resistance. The remnants of the Empire, still seething with rage, began to regroup. Secret alliances were formed, hidden factions emerging from the shadows. They still held weapons of mass destruction, and they were willing to use them. The first real challenge to humanity's newfound power came when an unknown faction, calling themselves the Empire's Last Hope, launched a devastating attack on a human colony. The strike was swift and brutal, targeting civilian infrastructure and causing massive casualties. The message was clear: the remnants of the Empire were not finished. Emily stood in the command center, her fists clenched. The loss of life was devastating, but the attack also sparked something in the hearts of the human soldiers, a fire that burned brighter than ever before. "We won't let them destroy everything we've built," Emily said, her voice filled with rage. "We'll show them what happens when they target us." Reaper turned to her, his face stoic. "We've always known they would come for us. Now we show them why they made a mistake." The human fleet, now stronger than ever, launched a counterattack. The remnants of the Empire had underestimated them once, and they would do so again at their own peril. Emily and Reaper led the charge, coordinating the attack with ruthless efficiency. The fight was brutal. The remnants of the Empire fought with the desperation of a wounded animal, but it wasn't enough. Humanity's resolve was unshakable, and their military strategy, refined and ruthless, proved too much for the Empire's broken remnants. One by one, the strongholds of the Empire's last hope fell. And then, the final blow came. The Exodus descended upon the last remaining fleet of the Empire's remnants, their ships scattered and disoriented. The battle was fierce, but there was no longer any doubt. The Empire's last hope had been extinguished. As the final remnants of the Empire's fleet were destroyed, Reaper and Emily stood together on the bridge of the Exodus, looking out at the galaxy they had saved. The war was over. The Empire was gone. But as they looked toward the stars, both knew that the true battle had never been about just defeating the Empire. It had been about something far greater. The future of the galaxy was in their hands now, and with it came the responsibility to rebuild, to ensure that nothing like the Empire would ever rise again. They had won, but the price had been high, and the future, for all its uncertainty, was theirs to shape. The galaxy, though now free from the shackles of the Galactic Empire, stood at a crossroads. The war had taken its toll on countless worlds, species, and civilizations. Entire cities had been leveled, billions of lives had been lost, and trust between races had been shattered. But for all the destruction, there was hope on the horizon. The victory was theirs, but it was only the beginning of a new era. Reaper and Emily stood together, watching as the shattered remnants of the Empire's fleet were swept away into the cold void of space. The final victory had been won, but the question remained: what would come next? Could humanity truly bring lasting peace to a galaxy torn apart by centuries of war and conquest? "We've done it," Emily said quietly, her eyes fixed on the stars outside the window of the Exodus. "The Empire's gone. But now, we have to make sure this never happens again." Reaper nodded, his expression thoughtful. "The galaxy isn't just going to fall into peace on its own. It never has. But we can build something different. Something better." It was a daunting thought. The weight of the galaxy's future now rested on the shoulders of a few, humanity's leaders, those who had brought about this unprecedented victory. The old factions and empires that had been destroyed were not going to simply disappear. There would always be those who craved power, those who would seek to rise from the ashes of the past. It was up to humanity to make sure the cycle of oppression and tyranny did not repeat itself. Over the coming weeks, humanity worked to unite the galaxy's scattered races, forming alliances with former enemies and forging a new, more balanced structure of governance. It was not easy. Old grudges ran deep, and many were wary of humanity's motives. But Emily, Reaper, and their allies were determined to show that humanity had no interest in ruling the galaxy. They had fought for freedom, for justice, for a future where no one would ever again suffer under the heel of an oppressive regime. They called it the Galactic Coalition, a loose union of civilizations united by common principles, peace, mutual respect, and the shared goal of building a future free from tyranny. But even as they worked toward this noble cause, they knew that the true challenge lay ahead. The remnants of the Empire still lurked in the shadows, seeking ways to regain power. The old power structures hadn't simply disappeared. They had gone underground, waiting for the right moment to strike again. One evening, as Reaper and Emily discussed their plans to strengthen the coalition, a warning signal blared across the command center of the Exodus. A fleet of unknown ships appeared on the scanners, rapidly approaching from the outer rim. "It's them," Reaper said, his voice tight. "The remnants. They've found a new leader." Emily's eyes hardened. "Then we end this now. For good." With swift efficiency, the human fleet mobilized. They had already proven they were a force to be reckoned with, and now, with the galaxy's future at stake, they would stop at nothing to ensure that the Empire's dark influence would never rise again. The final confrontation came quickly. The remnants of the Empire had gathered their strength, but they were still fractured and disorganized. The human fleet, though smaller in number, had the advantage in every other way. Their ships were more advanced, their strategy flawless, and their will unbreakable. The battle raged in space, ships maneuvering with deadly precision, but there was no question who would win. The remnants were no match for humanity's relentless drive. With one final, devastating blow, the last remnants of the Empire were wiped out, their forces scattered to the winds. The victory was swift, but the toll was still high. Lives were lost, and the scars of war would take time to heal. Yet, as Reaper stood amidst the chaos of victory, he couldn't help but feel a sense of finality. This was the last time the galaxy would see such a brutal conflict. As the dust settled, Emily stood beside him once again, her gaze turned to the stars. The universe was forever changed, and so were they. "The galaxy is ours now," Emily said, her voice calm but filled with conviction. "But it's up to us to shape it. We have the power to create something better, something lasting. We won't rule, Reaper, but we will guide." Reaper smiled, a rare glimmer of warmth in his eyes. "We will guide them, together." And so, the human race became the stewards of the galaxy. They forged peace not through dominance, but through the power of unity and resolve. Under their watch, the galaxy healed, and the flames of war were replaced with the light of a new era. The once proud Galactic Empire was no more, and the shadow of its tyranny was a thing of the past. In its place, a new galaxy had risen from the ashes. It was a galaxy built on the ideals of freedom, justice, and the unbreakable spirit of humanity. And as long as humanity's voice was heard among the stars, there would never again be an empire, only the promise of a brighter, more united future.